Today we're going to begin learning how to use Ready Math properly. I'm going to walk you through the steps of how we tackle a problem, and we're going to investigate a question from our classroom story. This comes from chapter 1, and the question is, how many people were shipwrecked on the island? What is the greatest number, and what could be the smallest or least number? So we don't know exactly how many people were shipwrecked on the island according to the text, but we do have some information here. Before we look at the information, the first thing we do with Ready Math is we think about what this question is all about. So what is the topic of this question? What is it asking us? It wants to know how many people there are on the island. It's not going to be just one number. There's actually a variety of numbers. It could be several numbers. But what is the greatest number that it could be, and what is the smallest number it could be? Okay, now, the next thing we need to think about is what information are we going to use in order to solve this? Let's look at the text. So I actually highlighted here where the numbers are in this story. So up here at the top it says 2 or 3 persons from each ship made it to the island. 2 or 3 persons. So it could be 2 people, it could be 3 people from each ship. What's missing from this line? Well, we don't know how many ships there are. Let's go down lower in the text. So, what are the key numbers here? Well, you've got 2 and 4. You could also include 3 because it said 2 to 4. So that would include 2, 3, and 4 could have been on a ship. And how many ships? Well, it says 5 or so. Well, let's stick with just the number 5. And what this is actually suggesting is it could be a little less or a little more than 5 when you have or so. In other words, the story isn't specific. It's a little bit, here's a word for you, it's a little bit vague. But we can still, with some accuracy, get an idea or a feel for how many survivors there are. And that's what this question is all about. So, now we know what the question is asking, and we know what information we're going to use. What's next? Okay, the next thing to do is to actually solve our problem. Okay, the first thing we did was we made sense of the problem. We read the question, we thought about it, we came up with the numbers we're going to use, and now we're going to use those numbers and we're going to solve the problem. Well, how could you solve this problem? You could solve it a variety of ways. You could draw a picture, and I actually provided several tools for you to use. You could use a hundreds chart. How could you use a hundreds chart? Well, you could skip count 2. And how many times would you skip count? Well, how many boats are there? You could skip count by 3. That would be the middle number. How many times would you skip count? Well, 5 times. That's how many boats there are. And then the largest amount of survivors would be the largest number of people per boat, and then include the total number of boats, right? Another tool you could use is this number line. You could draw on the number line. Again, skip counting. You would skip count 5 times, and you would use the numbers 2 and 4 to come up with the smallest and also the largest numbers. And the idea here is to do the solving more than one way and a couple different times. If you come up with totally different numbers, then you probably did something wrong and you need to go back and take a look at your work. One other strategy I really like is drawing. And I have a couple of icons here, or pictures. You've got a boat and you've got this little picture of a person. The way you're going to be using Google Classroom, in order to solve this, I originally thought you could copy and paste the boat and the person. I don't think you'll be doing that or able to do that, but you could use this idea of a boat and person, and you could just draw multiple boats and stick people in them. Literally stick people, right? And then count up how many people there are. So that's a good strategy for figuring this out. Finally, you're not done just because you solved the answer and you know the greatest and smallest number of survivors. The next thing you have to do is discuss your math, okay? You have to discuss what you did. And how are we going to do that? Well, for this particular problem, you will be typing what you did and what you came up with in the Google Classroom. Now, we've already done this when we talked about Sean going to Zeke's house, but now we're going to be really using numbers, and I want you to tell how you solved the problem, what you did, and explain, your work. You're going to type that in this question in the Google Classroom, and after discussing, that's you sharing, but after discussing comes this really fun part that I love in ReadyMath, where you're going to compare strategies. It's not enough to say and just share and tell what you did. I want you to read what your peers did. What did your classmates do to solve this? You might get some pretty good ideas reading what they did. They might have different answers than you. Maybe their answers are right, maybe they aren't right. When you read their explanations, don't think that they did it wrong, and don't be the type of person to tell them that they got it wrong, or what you think they did wrong. You could simply, I only want you to compliment people on their writing and their thinking and their math. It takes a lot to share. You have to be comfortable in sharing this information. So it's definitely helpful to know that there isn't a classmate at all that will say anything negative. And then lastly, you will be connecting and reflecting. And that's what I just said, where you will actually be replying to each other, and you'll be saying, the strategies that you liked best, and tell people what you thought of how they explained things. In this way, we'll all be getting better and better and better at not just our math and practicing the skills that we're learning in the classroom, but also our communication and finally our problem solving. And that's what this is all about.